accept and assert that, in your head, you just don't like to accept this. But I'm afraid this is an established, verified scientific fact.
Rumpus, can you pull back to your main screen for a second?
So can we at least for arguendo say that the clocks do change so we can continue with this? So if that is the case, even if you don't accept it to be true, could you come up with a reason why these atomic clocks have different times other than general relativity? And there also is some special relativity involved because of the speed that they're moving at.
That's right.
But we're not going to get technical. So,
I did mention two things that cause the change of time. One is your speed.
You did.
The other one is gravity. There are two things we know that cause time to change differently, which means it is not just a concept. It is a thing that interacts with the physical world.
Yeah, that's a good point. There are two distinct things that can affect time, right? Gravity and speed. So we know that those there is a physical thing involved because they're being affected by two distinctly different factors. So, yeah, I think of space-time as one entity. As to say to Rumpus, I accept Minkowski over like Neil Laurentian, but I do think it's a physical thing because it's acted upon by two different things.
I mean, Wotan, you seem to be in denial of science and these thousands and thousands of experiments.
I'm in denial of fairy tales.
Yeah, that's where we're getting
you
rutted
in. You can bend space. Like how do you prove space time? Can you prove space time?
Yeah, yes, because gravity. But hold on, because general relativity made two predictions that could be tested. One, which was the bending of light around the sun in 1919. Eddington did this experiment, and he showed it was in contradiction with the Newtonian physics that light was bent twice as much as it should have been. And there is another experiment that was done. That's right. We can actually demonstrate that light is actually affected by the Earth's gravitational attraction. As light leaves, there's an experiment famously done in Boston, which I can't remember the name of the damn thing now, which shows that light is as you get what's called a redshift associated with gravity. So, for instance, if you were to go near a black hole where there's an intense gravitational field, you become redder. And we can detect the same small effect actually on the Earth, where light is actually affected by gravitational effects. So you can get a gravitational redshift. So we can do these tests which demonstrate that the theory works perfectly. We can do actual tests.
How do you know it's gravity? It's not something else.
Well, because you could and also the orbit of Mercury also supports the general relativity theory.
Oh, but in the instance of the redshift over the black hole, how do you know that gravity is causing that and it's not something else, like some other kind of force?
You're going into an area that's not your like it's like me.
Well, I just don't like when they assert things and they don't know what's there. Like black holes, you can't see black holes. I
understand that, but my point is that I don't in these conversations I don't interject because I don't know them, and I'm perfectly fine with saying I don't know anything about that sort of thing. The crux and where we're stalling and we're not going to get anywhere except for a big circular argument where nobody's going to agree with anybody is that these issues that you can't speak of to any authority, and there's nothing wrong with that because I can't either. And so therefore,
we shouldn't be handicapped by your understanding, though. I mean, if he's making claims like
but you're having the conversation with him. So it's if he's not going to go to that aspect, we need to.
Well, we should make him more honest. But he's disputing things like facts that the general relativity explains the orbit of Mercury, which Newtonian mechanics doesn't. He's denying the existence of general relativity. He's denying whole areas of science.
Can't explain that. But
we have to make it clear. We have to make it clear that's what he's doing. He's denying experimental physics has been measured.
I mean, anybody that can listen, that's clear.
But Kyle, we can explain it, especially Rumpus. He has more experience than I do, but I'm not ignorant when it comes to science and physics. I can explain it. He can explain it. That's the point. Even though Wotan can't explain it, we're trying to show people it can be explained.
But he's not going to concede that point.
He doesn't have to concede that point.
This is not a class. This is not what I've done with this is not a classroom. You know what I mean? Like it's not. It
is a classroom. It's in the video description. The classroom stock.
You're not following.
But we have to make sure that we understand that he's denying the body of science. He's denying.
Yes. But what we need to find is a proof of example that he believes proves the Earth is flat, and then you guys can then take that other position in disproving that. Let's find a positive that he believes in instead of his like, I don't believe that water can hold truth inside of a globe.
Yeah, in other words, we should get him to stop just asserting things that have been proven to be true and assert something he has proof to make a positive claim.
Yes, because that's the only way this is going to be fruitful in any type of way. Otherwise, it's just circular.
Well, it has made several positive claims so far about water and the aeroplanes and things.
Right, and we would agree.
So I believe I've refuted all those.
You did not explain the water. You did not explain airplanes.
I explained.
He did actually.
This is where the gravity issue came on, because the gravity explains exactly why water, just like as I mentioned to you with electrostatic forces, and that things attract around balls.
Well, it's your belief that mass bends space-time, that space-time is yet to be proven.
Well, we don't need to go there we can just demonstrate, as Steve said, that we know that masses attract one another. If we can demonstrate masses attract, which we can, and you can do in your own bedroom, that we can show that, we can then say, water's attracted in the same way, and that explains the force of why water is attracted to the surface of the Earth.
And I have an experiment. I have a small experiment.
That's an extrapolation.
I have a small experiment, Wotan. How about something like this? To do your helicopter example. If I have a rod that's underwater, and I spin that rod, would you agree that there's going to be a very thin layer of water that's going to be going around with that rod at certain speeds? And as you go further away from that rod, the angular speed is going to change, right? There's a difference between angular speed and linear. So you are going to have some of that water going to be due to friction, right? To cohesion and the other things are going to be spinning along with that rod. And then as you extend out, you have less. Would you agree upon that?
Right, but it's not going to be going at the same speed as the rod.
Okay, well, but the Earth is very large, right? And because you have this atmosphere, the fluid, because atmosphere is a fluid, that is spinning at the same speed of the Earth. Rumpus, would you disagree with that?
Indeed, there is a slight gradient.
There's a gradient, yes, of course. But I'm talking about.
But fundamentally, it's all going around. But
the atmosphere is very small compared to the size of the Earth. It's very
that's
small.
right. And so once you get something spinning, and of course it gets lots of time to get up to speed, and eventually it becomes the shear forces. And as I mentioned very at the start about syrup, and you pulling that in and out, you can have shear stresses in fluids, and you have exactly the same with the atmosphere, but it's obviously to a lesser degree. But given enough time, it will spin up, and once you get if you accept, for instance, just like an airplane, you have a boundary layer. Once you will start dragging. You must accept that the airplanes drag air with them, and if you do that on the surface of them, then you just do that for long enough, then you will get there's a gradient profile of the moving other air, and if you do that for long enough, then it's gradually going to get a profile which is linked to the viscosity, and ultimately you end up with the atmosphere rotating with.
I mean, again, you just extrapolate with no experiments.
That's not
what you're saying. You're extrapolating.
You're
extrapolating experiments.
Shocking.
What I described with that
you're
gradient.
Comparing syrup to air. That's what you're doing right now. It's
Yes,
absolutely absurd.
You can extrapolate from what he said. It's not extrapolation. He's telling you the physics behind it.
How can you correlate syrup with air?
Because they're both fluids. There's just a different viscosity.
It's almost like somebody predicted we were right back here.
Syrup is way more viscosity than air. What are you talking about?
But they're both fluids. They're still fluid dynamics.
You said they couldn't. They're not. They are. Why can't you see it? They're just as a difference of magnitude. Why are you having such a problem with that?
But that difference of magnitude now it might be so much so that the difference of magnitude it doesn't happen in that in the atmosphere that way. It doesn't go around with the Earth at the same speed. That could also be a possibility, right? It could be that syrup is such a huge difference between syrup and air that air is not going to behave the same way as syrup, no matter how long it.
But we've done experiments for this, Wotan. We've done experiments
that an atmosphere can go around the Earth at the same speed as the Earth.
Well, you can do experiments in this lab that show that fluids like air are subject to, as I said, if you want to demonstrate this, for instance, if you wanted to pump air through a pipe, I talked about this earlier, you would end up with a boundary layer, a series of gradient of where the air is affected by the size of the pipe. And that's why you have big pipes can take a lot more than small pipes, because the viscosity of the air, the shear stresses on them are much less, obviously, with a bigger pipe. If what you're saying is that something like air did not be subject to shear stresses, you'll be able that situation would not exist. And there's loads of experiments on. Go and look up pumping air through pipes, and they will talk about the boundary layer and the shear stresses of the air fluid, and it says just a case of magnitude. So
no one's talking about
I don't know how anybody could disagree with that, to be honest.
I mean, this is incredible. Do you think it should suddenly stop?
Your experiments it has nothing to do with the air spinning around the Earth. You're talking about air.
No, hold on. But if you accept the principle that fluids can accept a shear stress, and that if you move something within a fluid, it will take some of the air through it and will drag it along, then you just imagine scaling it up. It's just a simple scaling operation.
But you don't know what happens at that magnitude that you extrapolate.
Wotan, if you could arrange an experiment for Rumpus to do, have you ever wrote out the methodological approach you would take and show what you would ask somebody to do? What would it entail?
Experimental water, you can't do it because it's impossible.
Well, no, you can't say you can't do it and then say, give me an experiment. You need to design the experiment to say, here, go do this experiment. How would you design the experiment?
Design the experiment for take any shape, any object, any size, any mass, and and make water float around.
Did you hear this earlier?
Right, but
somebody
do you not understand?
Say that he was trying to demand an impossible
that was
eventually we would get to.
But the thing is, the fact that it's impossible.
I was trying to say the exact same thing.
Listen, the fact that it's impossible. Let's quote one of the greatest scientists to ever live, Richard Feynman. It doesn't matter how beautiful your theory is, it doesn't matter how smart you are. If it doesn't agree with experiments, it's wrong. So you cannot do.
All this does agree with
cannot do an experiment.
You put the experiment forth. Exactly. You asked for the impossible experiment. Don't you see the utter hypocrisy in what you just fucking did?
Every experiment
That's the entire fucking point. You asked him to prove something that
the experiment is impossible because it doesn't. The experiment is impossible because it doesn't work.
No,
because
the small. But Wotan, we can do a small scale
experiment. You know what's
experiment.
impossible that doesn't fucking work? Your brain, Wotan. That's what it is.
God, Kyle's triggered.
Wotan.
Yeah, because I just spent 45 minutes listening to a rotational conversation about absolutely jack shit. I'm dumber for having to do this.
Rotational conversation. Literally,
well, you might have learned a bit about viscosity and and profile and pressure gradients and boundary layers.
Yeah, we could have gone to boundary conditions and Reynolds number and things like that.
But you see, what you say, don't understand.
It's insulting not only to Rumpus, who's actually trying to explain something that people can understand in a way that I don't have the most scientific brain, but I was following along with it fine. But if you come in here to a conversation knowing that you're not going to take any other kind of evidence for anything except for this experiment being done, and that experiment, you know yourself that you admitted is impossible, I think it's just a joke. This is why
it's impossible because it goes against physics.
Because you have no other evidence. Give me something that proves that the Earth is flat. Not impossible fairy tales. Give me a piece of proof. One piece. I just want one.
It's like saying I believe fairies created the universe. Oh, can you do an experiment proving fairies created the universe? No. Oh, well then that means that fairies created the universe. It's still plausible because the experiment is impossible to prove. That's exactly what you're saying.
Do you hear?
He doesn't listen to himself because that's so goddamn dumb. It's ridiculous.
That's the exact thing that what you're saying. It's the exact thing what you're saying. You're saying because the experiment is impossible to do, that your hypothesis of the universe is still plausible because all the experiment to do is.
I think I've got a good point here, Wotan.
Experiment.
By the way, I thought I was supposed to be doing the invective here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wotan, here's something to consider. Are you aware that the density of the atmosphere decreases with the height?
It does.
Great. Now, why do you think that is? If gravity wasn't pulling the atmosphere down on it and affecting it in that way, what do you think is causing it to become denser at the sea level than it is up, say, at the top of Mount Everest?
The particles just fall, and the lighter particles.
Why do they fall? What force is acting upon them? What force is making them fall? To make something
heavy, and they fall.
But Newton's second law, force is equal to mass times acceleration, means that for something to fall, there has to be a force acting on it. What force is acting on those molecules?
Well, it's not the benditure of space-time.
Well, let's not get. No, this is nothing.
Now you're really going to confuse him, Rumpus. I'm going to play with Kyle on this one. Don't confuse him with the difference between gravity is a force and Newtonian gravity is bending space-time. He'll blow a gasket.
Yeah, can we just deal with this for a second?
His own things will start leaking.
Really, did they bring that back?
That was a bit of a deflection. Can you please respond rather than deflecting? What force is acting on those molecules to make them fall?
We'll get Desert File in here if we need to.
Hold on, I'd really like him to answer this question.
Well, there's interesting theories that people are coming out with that are saying that it's some electromagnetic force or maybe some sort of static electric force.
Let's write this down. So that's number one. You think could be electromagnetic force. Any other ideas?
I said could be. I'm not adhering to these beliefs.
Okay, that's idea number one. It could be electromagnetic force. Any other ideas?
Static electric.
So two. So we've got electromagnetic force and we've got static electric force. Okay, so that's two ideas we've got so far for why the molecules in the atmosphere fall to the ground. Okay, that's two so far. Any others?
These are just some of the theories that I've heard.
Okay.
Angels pushing them down.
So would you like to consider another theory that begins with the letter G?
Well, no, because I don't believe space-time exists because it's ridiculous. You can't make space and time into one.
Let's just worry about there's a force that we have a name for that occurs between two masses, and that might account for why these molecules like coming down to the surface of the Earth. because there has to be a force acting on them. I'm glad you've accepted that. There has to be a force acting on those molecules to attract them to the surface of the Earth and
did he agree